All right, good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a few days, and we are definitely at the home stretch. Wanted to go over some things that make sure we know where you're at, what we have left. So we have this week and next week left. Today is Monday, May 11th, the day of Phase 1 opening here in Kansas. Um, there is an assignment. None of these are big assignments that we're going to have left, but it's a out of the textbook. I scanned a few pages out of the textbook and over a subregion of sub-Saharan Africa, and it's over West Africa. That is due uh, tomorrow at 1 p.m. And then I'm going to move on to something else. Um, Probably should have made it due tonight to make it easier for me tomorrow, but whatever. You can turn it in until uh, 1 p.m. tomorrow and get credit for the West Africa assignment out of the textbook. I'm then going to assign one over Central Africa and East Africa and Southern Africa. And those you'll just get, kind of like a daily thing. And they're easy. They're not a lot of points, but they're something, and they'll add up to like 20 points. So you can make some headway there. Also, Wednesday of this week, gonna try a Zoom Jeopardy over the world citizens that we had. There were like 45 of them. We're gonna have that'll be the last thing we do with citizens, and hopefully it'll be fun. Uh, Logistically, what I couldn't figure out was how to have you guys buzz in or whatever. So I'm gonna send a Zoom link out to basically two classes for one Zoom. So first and second hour, let's say, will be together at 10 a.m. on Wednesday. Whoever wants to join can join, and that way I can see the whole screen, because I'm assuming there will only be half of you at most that are there for the Zoom, so I can see the whole screen at the same time, and we'll talk about how you can raise your hand, or I think you can put in a little like thumbs up or something, and the first person to do that, or the first person I see do that, I can't promise I'll be exactly right. I'm going to try this. Never done it before. Um, I'll just call on that person, and they'll answer the question, and hopefully they get it right, and they'll get a point, just like we always have done. So we'll try that Wednesday. I'll assign like first and second hour for one session, third and fourth hour for the next session, and fifth and seventh hour for another session. And hopefully we end up with, I don't know, I'm hoping to get 20 to 30 people in each Zoom session to do a little of that. And then we'll do the same thing next week with the world map. We'll play World Map Jeopardy that way. So, and that'll be it. These last few assignments out of the textbook, the two Zoom Jeopardies, and that's your opportunities to raise your grade further or higher than what it is. Okay, hit me up with any questions that you have over that, and I'll be happy to answer them. I'm going to get to the Africa notes at this point. And just kind of, there's not a lot, but I'm going to kind of clarify a couple things here. Africa is the only big continent the only major landmass that's right on the equator, so it's kind of almost symmetrical along the equator in terms of there's more land size above the equator because Africa sticks out to the west. But when you go through climate zones from the center of Africa on the equator, if you go north or south, you kind of experience the same thing as you get further away from the equator. It's the only place in the world that's like that. It also is the only large landmass like this that doesn't have a big mountainous backbone, because you have the Alps in the middle of Europe, and you have the Rockies here in North America, and of course the Himalayas in Asia, and so on. This is a large landmass. Of course, South. I didn't say South America, of course, has the Andes as well. This is the only one that doesn't have it. The Atlas Mountains are a tiny mountain range. They're basically they are the exact same mountain range as the Appalachians in our southeast. Back at the time of Pangea, that would have been connected. And the Appalachians are not a big mountain range. So the Atlas aren't a big mountain range either. Um, so there's no large mountain range in Africa. Because it's squarely positioned on the equator, it's kind of ironic at the moment, but uh, the, it's a breeding ground for infectious disease that stems from parasites. So things like mosquitoes or snails, flies. Uh, those species are attracted to heat and humidity. Uh, Much of Africa is tropical and hot and humid, everywhere around the equator. So they deal with more of those diseases, and you can read about some of those. I would have brought in a reading, and if we have time, I'll share it with you um, in an assignment later. I'm not sure that we're going to have time for that, but some pretty nasty stuff when you read about things like river blindness or some of the other guinea worm. That's the one I'm trying to think of. If you read about those things, the types of diseases and types of things that happen to you if you contract parasite, and they're far more prevalent in an area like Africa, specifically Central Africa, uh, closest to the equator. It's and there's a lot more people that live in that area than there are in other places. In South America, where the equator goes through, it's largely the Amazon, and there's not many people that live there. Okay, so I gave a list of a variety of Ebola and trypanosomiasis and malaria and things that are transmitted through parasites. Uh, some vocab words: epidemic and pandemic and things like that. Obviously, right now, I think we're all very familiar with what a pandemic was. Not sure you would have been familiar with a pandemic, what that means 5 months ago, but certainly you are at this point. You probably knew that Africa is where humans developed 7 million years ago. The first early humans in what is now Ethiopia. The earliest human has been discovered there. We talked about that when we were looking at Charles Darwin as a citizen and how the humans evolved over time. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Okay, Africa specifically. The the African continent, from a people standpoint, developed inverted compared to most of the other places. We talked about how the other places have these big cities on the coast, and that's how they developed. Whether you're talking about Europe, with places like Rome and London and Athens, and Paris isn't right on the coast, but it's close. Amsterdam and Copenhagen, a variety of places that are on the coast. Well, uh, Africa isn't like that, and you can use us, the United States, New York and Boston and Baltimore, uh, even Philadelphia is a river that's close to the coast, not technically on the coast. Uh, South America is maybe the most extreme example, where almost all of their cities, just about every single one of them, is literally on the coast, and there's nothing in the interior. Um, Africa was the opposite. It developed on the rivers in Africa. Uh, and so it had no contact with the outside world up until the last few hundred years. It's not that there weren't people there; it's where people started. But they didn't they didn't have coastal cities, and in fact, the coastal people, the people that were closer to the coast, that would move around and um, have the coast as part of their life, were not the urban dwellers. And so the urban dwellers, which were more interior, viewed those coastal people as more of the uncivilized folk, which again is the opposite of other places, where when we developed New York City and Boston and Baltimore and so on, we viewed the people of the interior, the Native Americans, they were the less civilized people. Um, Same thing in South America, and same thing in Europe. The barbarians, what they called them, that lived in the center, or center east as it got more continental. Those people were referred to as the barbarians, and of course, the more sophisticated people, as it was perceived, uh, were the ones that were on the coast. Well, Africa was different. The more sophisticated people, um, perceiving themselves as more sophisticated, were in the interior and had no contact with the outside world from a religious standpoint, from a linguistic standpoint, from any kind of cultural. They just had no contact, so their culture developed completely separately from the rest of the world. Whereas most of the rest of the world had some sort of contact with other coastal places. So that's why you see the architecture and the dress and the language and the style of communication is totally different in Africa than it was. And so it's just been the last few hundred years since the beginning of the slave trade that that's been that they've had any contact, and therefore some of those cultural aspects have diffused into African culture, and vice versa. Some of African culture is diffused outside, but that's why everything about their tangible cultures, like their art and architecture, are just totally different, and clothes, totally different than the rest of the world. Okay, so I'm going to do one more of these. We're going to talk about the slave trade and the colonization of Africa. But this is done for now, and I will see you next time. And I think that'll be my last one of these I do. Take care.